What's up, booktube? Welcome back. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm talking about my top 10 best books of 2021. So two things before I get started on my top 10 list here. First of all, there is not going to be a top 10 worst books of the year. I didn't really have any worst books. I had a handful of books that I gave 2 stars, but none of those books were bad enough that I feel like they warrant being on a worst books of the year list. I'm not sure if that makes sense. There were books that weren't for me, but I could understand why other people like them, and I just don't have strong enough feelings about any of them to put them on a huge shit list basically. So this year is only going to be a positivity and talking about the best books of the year. Now for my best books of the year, my other thing to mention, I really had a hard time ranking these. Basically number 10, 9, and number 1 are solidly in their place, but everything from 2 to 8 could be completely interchangeable. There's really no order to any of those ones. I kind of tried a little bit, but genuinely I liked pretty much the rest of them equally. They're all really solid reads, and the order for the rest of them is pretty randomized for the most part. So with that said, let's get into my top 10 best books of the year. Number 10, which is kind of a surprise to me. I never thought that I would see a book like this on my top 10 of the year. But that one is It's Been a Pleasure, Noni by Claire Christian. This one is an adult contemporary romance. I'm a fantasy reader. It's weird for me to have this on here, but it really belongs in my top 10. This book just blew me away. This is about Noni Blake. I think she's in her late 30s or 40s, around there. She's from Australia, and she's just gotten out of a 10-year-long relationship, and she realized that she has not been happy in a very, very long time. She has stopped putting herself first. She stopped doing things to make herself happy. She wants to go on this worldwide pleasure quest and just sleep with every man, woman, and in between who want to sleep with her as well. She wants to do things that makes her happy, get a tattoo, cut her hair, dress in a way that makes her feel sexy, just do all of these things that she stopped doing for her after she got into her relationship and was living for somebody else. She wants to live for herself again and rediscover a love for her own body and herself and her life and just all of these wonderful things. This was such an incredible book. It had some really steamy romance in there. There were also some hilarious moments in here. This book had me doing everything from sobbing to laughing hysterically in the span of a couple of pages. The range of this book was incredible. It was hilarious and heartfelt in just everything that I could possibly want in a romance book. This is probably my favorite romance that I've ever read ever in my life. I read this book months ago and I still think about it all the time. I still think about some of the messages that were in there and try to apply it to my own life. I just really resonated with Noni as a character. I really saw myself in her a lot, and I just loved this one so freaking much. Coming in at number 9 is also kind of a surprise for me. That one is They Both Die at the End by Silvera. This one is kind of a YA contemporary romance with a heartbreaking sci-fi twist to it. It takes place in our world, but somehow the government has figured out a way to tell you exactly when you're going to die. And every day between midnight and 3 a.m. if you get a phone call from the government, it's them informing you that it is your death day, and there is not a thing that you can do to stop it. And so society has kind of reworked itself to turn death into some capitalistic monstrosity basically, and everything is centered around these death days, things to do that are for people who are dying that day to have one really amazing last day. There are theme parks and museums and apps and all these things, and that's actually how our 2 main characters meet. This one is a dual perspective. It's about these 2 teenage boys who are both dying on the same day, and so they end up going on this app to try and find someone to spend their last day with, and they end up meeting through there and going through this whole whirlwind adventure over the next 24 hours and just falling in love so hard and so fast. And it's just the most beautiful love story that you know it's only going to end in absolute misery, because it literally says it in the title. You know that they're going to die at the end, but you just can't help but root for them anyways and just hope that by some miracle they won't. And just oh my god, this book made me freaking sob like a baby. The plot of this one and the romance is fantastic and everything, but the part that I loved the most was seeing how the author wove things together. He would take little Easter eggs from earlier in the plot and put them in later on, and it was just this beautiful show of how everyone is so interconnected, and it just kind of shows you how everything is kind of leading towards this one same thing, and it shows how all of our fates are so intertwined. It was just this really beautiful show of that. I have no idea how to properly explain that. You just kind of have to read it to see what I mean, but it was just fantastic, and I want to reread this one so badly so that I can go back and find all of those Easter eggs that I may have missed. But I do have to emotionally heal first, because wow, that book hurt me in the best way possible, but still, ow. Number 8 is Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. This one I got as an ARC from NetGalley, and it just blew me out of the water. This one is an Ethiopian-inspired debut fantasy that is a horror retelling of Jane Eyre, and wow, just wow. I was so impressed with this book, especially with it being a debut. The writing was incredible and just like everything about it was so lush and beautiful. But before I get ahead of myself there, the plot of it would probably help you guys. This one again is a Jane Eyre retelling. It's set in Ethiopia and our main character is what's called a Detera, and her job is to go into people's houses to cleanse them of the evil eye curse. The evil eye takes the form of manifestation, which can come in a number of forms. Some examples were like there was a room in this house that fills up with blood and like drowns you in blood for the entire night, but you don't die, you just like lay there awake drowning all night. There was one closet that you would walk by where the cobwebs would whisper your deepest fears into your ear. Just like really creepy, spooky, haunted house kind of things. It was amazing. If you like Crimson Peak, definitely read this book because it gave me like major Crimson Peak vibes. But anyways, so she gets her first solo job at this house that 10 other Deteras have tried to cleanse and none of them have been able to succeed. But our main character is desperate for the money, so she goes to try and she's thinking about quitting because it's just too hard, but she ends up falling in love with the man who has the curse on him. And so she has to stay to try and help him and hopefully not die in the process. I cannot tell you how much weird kind of joy this book gave me because it's a freaky book. Like it has some really, really good horror elements to it. And like I love horror, so I wasn't mad about it, of course, but like it was freaky. And there were some parts in there where I was genuinely like, what the fuck? Like how are y'all gonna survive this? It was just so well done. It was so beautifully written. The world was lush and like all of the lore and everything happening was just amazing and so fascinating. I could read an entire series set in this world and just be so happy about it. Like I loved it so much and I hope everybody reads this one. Coming in at number 7 is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This one is a queer polyamorous reimagining of Dracula's Brides that takes place over hundreds of years and is written as a letter from the first bride to Dracula that she wrote to him after the events of the book have taken place and she's kind of processing everything. It is deliciously gothic and so beautifully written. Like this author was made to write gothic literature. This book feels like it could have been written hundreds of years ago and I would have believed it, but it was still very readable and easy to consume. It was just amazing. Oh my god, and surprisingly steamy as well, so it's definitely not a YA book. There were some sexy scenes in there, so keep that in mind. And obviously they're vampires, so there is a whole lot of blood and death and gore and all of these things kind of wrapped in here, kind of in and among all the romance and the beautiful sweeping balls and operas and all this stuff. It is just so freaking good. I just adore this book and I want to read more with this author so badly. For number 6, we've got Defekt by Nino Cipri. This is the second book in the Littenverse duology, the first book being Finna, which I have talked about to death on my channel and I will not stop doing it. So the Littenverse duology takes place at a knockoff IKEA somewhere in America, and in this IKEA sometimes wormholes open up that take you to different portal universes. So it is a portal sci-fi, which I really fucking love. Portal fantasy is my favorite thing ever, so I was really happy to have a kind of like sci-fi twist to it. It was wonderful. But the first book follows two main characters who have just recently broken up, but they both work there, and when this wormhole opens up, a customer's grandmother gets lost inside and their managers force them to go in and risk their lives trying to find this customer. And then book 2 takes place, I believe it's the night afterwards, and it follows our main character who is friends with one of the ones who went into the wormhole, and it's his story, and his story is wild and so unexpected. Book 2 is definitely one where you do not want to know what's going on before you read it. Like literally just go to this one so blind, like read nothing about it. The synopsis is intentionally very vague. It gives you like zero information to what the actual plot of this one is. This book just, oh my god, this was amazing. This was better than book 1, which is saying a lot because book 1 is like one of the best things that I've ever read in my life. I loved Finna, but Defekt was just wow. It completely floored me. I will think about this series probably for the rest of my life. I just adore them, and like they have all this weird like sci-fi portal stuff happening, all these like really interesting like weird creatures coming out of the portal, all this stuff, but really the main point of this series is not about that. It's really a commentary on what it's like to work in customer service and to be living and working in a capitalist society, and like the lengths of which people who work customer service have to go to in order to, you know, do their jobs and not get fired for, you know, not wanting to risk their lives, basically. It's a really, really interesting read. It gets so fun and fast-paced and just fascinating to read, but it also has this fantastic commentary on our world and our society, and it's just so well done. I really hope that the author writes more in this world because there are so many places where they could go with this, and I want more of it so badly. Number 5 has to be Taming Demons for Beginners by Annette. This This is book 1 in the Guild Codex series. This one is Canadian, which is fantastic. It takes place in Vancouver, and it's about this girl whose parents have recently passed away, and so she's living with her uncle right now while things get settled. But her uncle has stolen her fortune and will not give her any of it, and so she is working to try and get her inheritance back and just be able to go and live her life. And while she's doing that, she learned that her uncle is actually running an illegal demon selling ring in the basement. Her parents were demon hunters, so she was already aware of the spirit world, so this was not a surprise to her, but it is still very much illegal to have demons trapped in the basement. She ends up accidentally befriending this demon because she loves to bake, and she got scared one day and like threw a plate of cookies at him, and they became friends because he liked her baking, and then they just kind of start this really weird, unlikely friendship, and then things kind of go from there. This one was just incredible. I cannot wait to get to the rest of this series. I think there are 4 books in the series, and it just has so many tropes that I love in here. Like, I love the trope of the unlikely friendships between a human and a demon, or like some kind of monster. It's also a very slow burn romance between the two of them, which is even better. He's also hot as fuck, so like that's also nice. And even better, this one is also a new adult book. I really want to read more new adult fantasy books because they're just so much fun, so this is a great place to start with that. Yeah, I just adored this book and I need the sequel like right now. Number 4 has to be One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. Everybody was raving about this book earlier this year for very good reason. This one I also got as an ARC from NetGalley, but I had to go out and buy my own copy of it because I couldn't not. This one was incredible. This one is a sapphic contemporary romance with a sci-fi twist to it. It follows our main character who has just moved to New York City, and her new roommates are like the queerest bunch of people that I've ever seen in my life, and they're wonderful. She keeps running into this girl on the subway, and she looks like this like really hot lesbian punk rocker who looks like she is right out of the 70s, and turns out she is stuck in some kind of time loop on the subway. She's been there since the 1970s and she's unable to get off the subway. So these two start to work together to try and figure out how she's stuck here and how to possibly get her home, but of course along the way they end up falling in love, and it's just this beautiful romance between the two of them. And like, I love the romance in here, but like really the best part of this book is definitely the side characters and this whole beautiful giant queer family that they've made for each other. I did do a full video review on this one. If you want to check that out, I'll leave a link down below. But in that review, I said that this book is a celebration of what it means to be queer, and I stand by that so much. There are so many different kinds of characters in here from so many different walks of life, and they're all just this beautiful family, and it was just so heartwarming to see, because like as queer people, we often struggle to find that sense of family, but once you do find that chosen family within the queer community, it's just the most beautiful thing in the world, and that's what this book is. I will stop there because I will keep gushing about this, but if you want to hear more thoughts, I will leave that video link down below for you guys. Coming in at number 3 is In Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens. I adored this book. It was a real toss-up between this one and One Last Stop for which one deserved number 3, but ultimately the spot has to go to In Deeper Waters. I love this book so much. In this one, our main character Tal is the prince of the seaside kingdom, but he has been hidden away for most of his life because he has the same magic that his grandfather had, and his grandfather was this tyrant who ended up like burning the world and killing all of the like mermaids and magical creatures of their world, as well as burning all of the history of them. That way the people would forget who they were. So Tal has the same magic, but if the people knew about that, then they would demand that he be killed because he's just too powerful. So he's been hidden away for his entire life, but it is now his 16th birthday and he wants to go on his coming of age tour. So his older brother takes him on his ship for a tour around the kingdom, and on his very first day he runs into a boy named Athlin who has been trapped on a burning ship. So he saves his life and the two end up very quickly falling in love, and our story goes from there. There is a whole lot more to this story. Like, this is not a big book, but it packs a punch. There's a lot happening in here. There's all this like political stuff happening, a war is brewing, there's stuff to do with the magical creatures, all of these things. Like, there is so much happening in this book, but that's just kind of the gist of it. I adored this book. It was so beautifully written. These settings are definitely the best part of it. They were written wonderfully and I could visualize them so perfectly in my head. And just overall, this book just touched my heart in a way that I was not thinking it was going to. I thought it was going to be a like really fun fantasy book, and it was, but just something about it just buried itself in my soul and just lives there now, and it will live there forever. And I did also do a full video review for this one, so I will also link that down below for you guys. Number 2 has to go to The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This one is really hard to explain what it's about, but I'll do my best. Basically, it takes place around this circus that only appears at night, and there's a whole bunch of stories that are kind of like interwoven surrounding the circus that take place over, I forget how long, but like a good couple years at least. Probably longer than that, but I forget right now. the main focus of this book are these two characters who have been being trained since childhood to be part of this game, but they were not told what the rules are, what the game even is, or who their competitor is. But they've both been gifted with some kind of magic at the circus, and they turn their circus exhibits into actual real magic. That is really not the best description of it, but this book is so hard to explain. Like, you really just need to go into it not knowing much about it and just kind of enjoy the ride. It was incredible. It was so beautifully written. I don't know what else I could say about it aside from just gushing about it. The writing in here is some of the most beautiful writing that I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing in my entire life. It was visually stunning, and just everything about it was so perfect. It was heartbreaking. I sobbed my way through this book. It was just like, wow, I was floored reading this one. Again, I could just keep gushing about this book, but that's really all that I can say without like giving too much away, so I will just leave that there. But like, if you have not somehow read this book, please do so. It was so good. And then finally, my number one book of the year has to go to A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. Oh my gosh, this book has completely stolen my heart. This one takes place in a world set way in the future where humans had been making robots and AI technology for years, and one day they ended up gaining sentience and they became their own people, kind of. And the robots wanted to kind of go off and live their own lives away from humans. And so the humans took half the planet and the robots had the other half, and it was just left to their own devices. Nobody was allowed to go there. So our book takes place a few hundred years after this has happened, and it follows our main character, who is a traveling tea monk. They travel from town to town and set up shop and just have people come and have a nice cup of tea and tell them their woes and just feel better for a couple of hours. But our main character has grown restless, and so they decide that they want to go on this pilgrimage to this old shrine that is in the wild place that's for the robots. And so they set off on their own into the wilderness, and they end up being the first human in hundreds of years to meet a robot. I could go on and on about all the different things that this book is about, but I'll leave that there. Reading this book, it felt like the author just reached right into my soul and plucked out all of my fears and worries and negativity, and then just gave me a big hug and told me that everything would be okay. I relate so hard to the main character in this one. I really can't describe to you what reading this book felt like without like crying, but basically this one meant a whole lot to me, and I just, oh my god, I loved this book so much. It was amazing. Like, this book, oh my gosh, I can't even like talk about it. Like, this is my favorite book of the year, and I don't know how to talk about it because like my feelings towards this book are so like personal that I really have no idea how I can articulate that in a way that makes sense to other people. But basically this book is just what's in my brain, and it was a magical experience reading it, and I loved it. Which, like, not the most helpful of reviews, but like I really don't know how else to put it, so I'm just going to leave that there. But yeah, so those are my top 10 books of the year. I've had an incredible reading year. I've read so many amazing things, and honestly picking my top 10 was kind of difficult because there were many more that I wanted to put on here. I think I had 18 5-star reads this year out of the 82 that I read, so that was awesome. But yeah, I will leave that there, so please let me know down below what your best book of the year was, or your top 5, top 10, whatever you want to do. Just let me know down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on them. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!